But I also did have a history of eating disorders. So when I was...
Before you started competing?
Way before, yeah. So I think it was just a trigger for that sort of, those behaviours to come back. And I hadn't been struggling with an eating disorder since I was about 18. And then I started competing when I was 30. So, yeah, it just brought a lot of those behaviours to surface purely because of those really terrible diets that I was doing, which I obviously don't do now.
Yeah. But the nutrition has come a long way, because my friend competed as well. He competed in New Zealand and he actually won a show, but he was doing a similar thing. I remember seeing him, and I was young and didn't know too much. I thought he was... I had a sneaky suspicion that he may have taken like some special supplements because he was huge, but like he didn't. But he was just...
you can buy those at the store.
But he was massive, and I saw him once, and he was like doing these incredible lifts. He's shorter than me and was like smaller than me.
People that are shorter, just so lucky.
But he was so strong. He was like squatting. I think he squatted around like 200 or something like that, and he was doing really incredible lifts. And before I trained with him earlier, he wasn't pushing out numbers like that. But his diet was, he was like always having the oven on, like air frying, baking, like white fish, tuna, weighing everything. And that's kind of what we thought bodybuilding nutrition was like. That's what you have to eat, and then you'd have to have like this was in the era where you have to have 8 meals a day. So he was always eating, timing things to perfection. But things have really changed. And I think if you have a tendency or a history of eating disorders, it could be quite a task to go into that.
100%.
Weighing things, because you have to measure calories, or some people don't. If they just get a meal plan, then you can just follow it. But you still have to be very aware of what you're eating. And if that triggers something, then that can be a path that's not going to be the best for you. And I think that's why... I think there's more of a conversation around it now, but a lot of coaches aren't making that recommendation now like they used to. Like, because a lot of personal trainers would do that and say, this is a goal, because it's like, that's kind of like what we thought the peak of physiques was, like competing, and it still is. But back in the day, it was more so like, you just compete and then you can just like give it your best shot and stuff like that. But now it's a little bit like, do you really want to do this because it comes with this, and this, and this?
I mean, there's a lot of negativity. I mean, it does really receive a lot of negativity. And it continues to be like, there's two sides of it. There's a real negative side to it, and there's also a really positive side, which you wouldn't really know until you are in it yourself. But if, going back to eating disorders, I think it's also the fact that there aren't many coaches they're not asking those questions. So, a client will come to a coach and, hey, I want to compete, and there's probably no conversation around the history of that person, like their mental health, or have they, had disorders in the past, like, whatever it may be. I just think that a lot of people kind of go into competing and don't really understand that it can trigger certain things if you have that history. And, restriction is obviously the main trigger, because you feel so restricted, and then it kind of takes you, then it kind of attaches, like guilt is attached to that, right? If you make if you eat off your plan or whatever it is, and then the guilt eats away at you, and then all of that's kind of like where you can spiral into that trap. But so for me, the early stages of my competitive career, I honestly, I don't even know how I got through all of that, to be honest. But then I found a really, really good coach, and I've been with her for 6 years, and we have such great communication that whenever I did feel triggered during a prep, for example, I would communicate that to her. And then for the last few preps that I did, I actually did I'd follow macros versus a restrictive meal plan. And that really worked for me. That was perfect, because I didn't feel restricted. It didn't give me those triggers. It didn't, I just knew, okay, well, if I want 20 grams of chocolate at the end of the day, because that's going to, I'm craving it or whatever the reason is, then that's great. I can do those things and I don't feel restricted and I can be happy with the process versus, really struggling every day eating the same thing. And, but having done maybe 2 or 3 preps like that, just following macros, it really did me a world of good, because then the very last prep that I did, I was actually ready to do a meal plan. And the reason why I wanted to switch back to a meal plan is because we wanted to take out the variables, because the issue with following macros is that, they will be variables. Your body may fluctuate depending on what you eat. So we thought, okay, let's follow macros for a certain period of time through the prep, because I normally do about a 20-week prep. And then...
And is that prep just all cutting? So you're doing like a 20-week cut? Or
no,
is that still some off-season?
No, so...
or some bulking?
Yeah, so essentially for me a longer prep works really well because you can do conservative calorie drops versus an aggressive approach. If you start 12 weeks out, it's pretty aggressive. You're going to have really dramatic drops in your calories, and no thanks. That is not for me. So, a 20-week prep is beautiful because you can just have those little, and sure enough, there will be a point where it gets really, really tough.
It's inevitable for it to be.
It's inevitable. That's
very challenging.
Yeah, it's the name of the game. So 6 to 7 weeks out, sure, you're going to be struggling. That's the whole point of it. You're not going to be, your body fat percentage is so low that it's not a sustainable way to be. So those challenges will come. But having that flexibility early in my prep and really maturing as well, as a competitor, I think has been really, really good for me. And that's why I've sort of regained that passion for it and have grown mentally, and all of those experiences that I had really early on, they just seem so distant to me now.